Okay, in this lesson, we're going to look at how to gather data to conduct a rural land use mapping exercise. And the first stage would be the gathering of the data. And prior to even visiting a rural area to gather the data on the land use, you would actually have to prepare your base maps. And this would require a little bit of research in advance, as well as preparing your base maps in terms of the different land uses that you're likely to encounter. The second step you also have to do prior to leaving is decide on what your land use classifications are. Now, in urban areas, you will have been taught, or may have been taught, that you would use the RICEPOTS system. That's the RICEPOTS, where each of those letters represents a word. So R in RICEPOTS represents residential, I represents industry, C represents commercial, for example. However, these land uses classifications are not particularly useful in a rural environment because the rural land uses are very different. So let's just deal with that first thing, deciding on our land uses. A common one, a global land use classification system, can be found here, where all of the types of crops are put into one of the certain types of categories. So permanent crops might be, for example, a fruit plantation, apple trees, or an area used for strawberries every year under glass houses. Temporary crops, these are ones that are sown every year and might change from one year to the next. So, for example, wheat might be in the field one year, next year it might be barley. Now, you might want a sub-classification for temporary crops. So if you're going to create a letter to represent temporary crops, for example, TC, then you might want to put in brackets what it was. So if it was wheat, you might put W in a bracket, or if it was barley, you might put B. And that allows you to just have a further bit of data that you'd be gathering when you were out in the field. If the field was empty, you might use fallow, meadows, pastures, permanent meadows, pastures. You've then got lots of other land uses. So you're going to have lots of lochs and water bodies, rivers, for example. You're going to have different types of forestry in rural areas. And you want to be able to classify your forestry into different groupings, whether it's planted forests or primary forests that are naturally regenerated and have been there for a long time and are not there for commercial reasons, as well as other naturally regenerated forests. You might also want to subclassify your forests into whether they are coniferous or deciduous, so pine needles or broadleaves. And then finally, you are going to also have some built-up areas. You're going to have farms. You're going to have small villages. You might even have towns, roads, things that have been built by people. So they will need their own classification. And then they'll just be barren land. So you need to decide on what your land use classification is going to likely be and what letter you're going to record on your base map when you actually go out to the field and you need to record what it was. So that's likely to be PC, TC, F, TMP, whatever it is. Okay. Right, that's the land use classification that you're going to come up with. So let's have a little look at how you create a base map. So when you're visiting an area, you might start with an Ordnance Survey map. The problem with an Ordnance Survey map in a rural environment is it doesn't really tell you how the land is being divided up. So if we go in Digimaps and switch using our map selector to showing us an aerial view, we will get an aerial photograph of that landscape. And that starts to give us a bit of a better indication of what the land's being used for. What you have to bear in mind at this stage is that aerial photographs are taken at a certain point in time, and that the older that photograph is, the more likely that the land use might have changed when you actually get there. But it is a useful starting point for creating your base map. Okay, so to prepare your base map, you've got to divide your land up based on the information you're given in the photograph. So you can see I've actually started to do this here, where I've identified what looks like an area of land that is all the same kind of thing, and I've drawn a large shape around it. Likewise, I've done so here as well. And if we were to be looking at this entire landscape, I'll show you how to create your base map, which is actually through creating a series of polygons. That's what each of these shapes are. So I'll show you how to create a polygon. I need to click on the pencil of the Digimap tool. And I want to create a shape, which is already highlighted, and the polygon is already highlighted. So all I now need to do is choose my line color. Now you'll notice I've already done these in black, and I don't want any fill at the moment because I'm just creating my outlines for my fields. So I'm all set up to go. Now what I can do, if I just collapse this sidebar, is I can create my polygons. So if we take this field here, let's say we were going to be visiting it, I want to create my drawing tool. So I'm going to create my shape. I'm going to select my polygon, which is the one I want. I've got my line selected, and I'm ready to draw my shape by just clicking on a corner of the field, stretching, clicking again when I want to change direction, and doing a single click on my mouse every time I want to change direction. What that allows me to do is create my shape outline for the field. And then if I click one more time, I can leave my shape behind. Okay, I can move somewhere else on my map. Let's say I'm going to be visiting this field here. And I'm clicking around this field because this looks like it's got a crop in it of some description. Okay. I can, there we are. I can see I've got what looks like a farming complex. I'm not sure what it is, but I'm going to create that as an area that I'm going to go and visit to find out what that land use is. And what I'm actually doing right now is I'm creating my base map. I'm also preparing myself when I create my land use map, which is the point of this whole exercise. Okay. Oh, you have to get the click right, and that should allow me to leave this behind. It takes a little bit of fiddling around to get used to the actual process. There we are. So now what I've done is I've created a series of polygons, which I'm now going to be driving along this road, and I'm going to visit these places, and I'm going to decide on what that is. So the final step of gathering data is actually the field visit. Now, I would want these base maps printed off. I could either have them printed off like that, or I could have them printed off like that with the Ordnance Survey map underneath. And I could be adding my symbols to it. It's my choice how I best want to view my data. One advantage of using this is obviously I can see the contour pattern, so I get an idea of the shape of the land. And an idea of what the different land uses are, assuming I have a key. If I choose to go with the aerial view, I don't know what the shape of the land is, but the aerial photograph does give me some information about the likely land uses. So the final step is when I arrive, I would step out of my vehicle, I would walk, and I would decide what that is. Now, let's just say that is land that's not being used for anything at the moment. I would have my land use classification, and I might have it as fallow. So is it cultivated? Has it been ever cultivated? If it's never been cultivated, then I might have it as a temporary meadow. I'd have to decide what its land use was. Likewise, I might realize that this is a farm, so I'm going to put this as the letter U, and I'd write that on my land use map. If this had cattle in it, for example, Highland cows, I might have it as a temporary crop, because next year it might be something different. Okay, and I would write TC onto my map to record that data. When I return to the classroom, I would then transfer that data into creating a detailed land use map, which I will show you in the next step.